Hello my precious everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm bringing you my first D&D focus video that I've had in a while, although if you're here for the cosplay stuff, don't worry, that's gonna be my main thing still, but I want to start including a little more D&D on the side like you used to. I feel like it's been a while. Anyway, the focus of today's video is for me to share tips I've learned after DMing for over 100 sessions. Actually, my home campaign is over 120 sessions. We play weekly, about 5 to 6 hours per session, so I've been DMing a lot. And I also run a second campaign, which isn't as frequent or as long, but you know, there's that too. By no means do I claim to be some sort of like D&D expert, but I feel like I've learned a lot from DMing, and I thought I'd share some of the things I learned with you all. Some of what I'm going to share with you are actual tips, but a lot of it is more just sentiments and encouragement, and I think they're nice for other DMs to be reminded of, and I hope that they provide you with some inspiration and encouragement. And of course, with DMing tips, DMing advice, and stuff related to that, not all of this will work for all tables, but I feel like most of it is fairly universally applicable. But I'm talking too much, so let's just get into it. I'm trying to film this before I stream in less than an hour, so gotta go. So my first one is that sometimes messing up just doesn't matter that much. I feel like, especially online, there's just a lot of pressure to be perfect. I mean, this applies to all areas of life, and it can come from your players and yourself, but like now that D&D is more popular, there are a lot of D&D live plays and a lot of D&D YouTubers and streamers who you can learn from, but you can also watch them play. And like in cases like Critical Role, you know, they're professional voice actors, so it can feel like you're going against an impossible standard. You know, you might take meticulous notes or spend all your free time trying to learn how to do new voices, and you might feel really hard on yourself if you make a bad call, or if a player manages to cheese a boss or a puzzle and you feel like it didn't deliver in the way you thought it should. Of course, do what feels good to you, and I'm not saying don't try to improve where you can, but most small issues can be laughed off. I've changed NPCs' voices from session to session, and I misremembered a character's backstory, so I accidentally changed one of the characters in their backstory's name because I thought I had it right and did not double check. Actually, I will link in the cards a whole video I made about some of my DM fail moments, just so you know. I've skipped plenty of people's turns in battle. And for most of us, DMing isn't our job, and we don't have to deliver professional quality sessions every time. And if you have long sessions like I do, or if you have infrequent sessions where it's not like top of mind, it's easy to forget or misremember a lot of things. And you know, it doesn't really matter that much. Obviously, there's an extent to what forgetting something or messing up. There's an extent to the problems that can cause, but a lot of it, you know, it can feel kind of egg in the face in the moment, and then you move on because we all mess up, and I'm sure your players have probably also messed up, and it's just not that big of a deal. Most people won't even remember it by the time the session is over. Especially for like fellow people like me who have a lot of anxiety, it can be very worrying if you feel like you didn't deliver your best, or you really messed something up, or even if you just came away with the session with a vague sentiment that things could have been better. But these things won't bother your players as long as they bother you. The best players, after all, are ones that are patient and understanding. So just trying to give yourself a break. But my second point is that there are fixes for a lot of common problems. After all, D&D is by no means a new game. It's celebrated its 50th anniversary. Of course, there's been different rules and additions, but it's really popular. And so if you find yourself continually encountering an issue, chances are someone else has encountered it, found a way to deal with it, and posted a solution online. A big thing people forget is concentration or other conditions, so you can get condition rings. Whew, sorry, I'm out of breath. I just ran up the stairs because I forgot to bring this, which I was going to recommend. In this particular section, let me put my mic down. In case you haven't noticed, my mic isn't actually plugged in. It just helps me enunciate better. But anyway, oh, this is upside down. I got this DM journal off of Etsy. It has a lot of useful things on here, but it's made my battles easier because I found myself having a very chaotic time. Here, sorry, it's been filled out. So it'll have initiative here, pre-written, so you don't have to write it in the chaos of battle. And then as information for the important parts of enemy stat blocks. This works great if you have your monsters in books and you don't want to write in the books what their health is at. You don't need a separate sheet of paper. You can keep track of their AC and their health here, so the most important information about the monster is here. You can even keep track of your player's health, but I don't do that, and I don't think most people do, so I put if they're with NPCs, I'll put that down here. And you can even write the date and location for memory keeping purposes. So battles were definitely a struggle for me in being organized during battles, so I recommend something like this. And even though you do eventually run out of pages, well, I haven't done this for this yet because I just erase and reuse them, but just keep one blank so you can make copies of it. And then in the beginning, actually, just to plug this real quick, I'm not sponsored or anything. Oh, you can keep information about your players here. This is where I put their passive insights and perception and stuff like that. They have these awesome sheets for session summaries where you can write the summaries here, some locations, some NPCs they meant, and stuff like that. So I really enjoy that as well. So I definitely recommend checking out things like that. Like, there's a lot of resources for note-taking, for running battles and stuff out there. It's fine to struggle with things, and it's fine to make mistakes. But if you notice you make the same mistakes over and over again, there's probably a fix or at least a tool to help improve that. Reddit or YouTube, I watch a lot of D&D YouTubers. If you just type in like an issue you have, struggling keeping track of initiative, I'm sure you'll find like tons of articles and people's opinions on how to deal with it, and lots of YouTube videos how to make things easier. My next point, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not, but it's that over prepping might actually be okay. Oh, my mic! I feel like a lot of beginner DM advice is along the lines of, don't over prep because your players are going to steamroll your plans. And I get the sentiment behind this, but the more I play, the less I find that that's something that resonates or even feels true for me. You know, for me, I like when I have towns prepared with a map and labeled stores and names of shops and names of shopkeepers and art for the NPCs, even though they don't go in half of these shops, and when they do half of that time, they never come back. But I feel better when I have a town's worth of information in front of me when they go to a town. I made a capital city once that had 28 pages, not of plot stuff, but just purely of shops and interesting locations in the city. It took me forever. But I felt really confident that I could give my players time to really explore and really get to know the place because I didn't feel like I was scrambling to come up with stuff on the fly. There was a lot that I'd already prepared for them to dig into. And yes, of course, it's good to exercise preparing things on the fly, but especially if this is a location you feel like they might come back to multiple times, it's kind of nice to have a really solid basis for what it's like, at least in my opinion. And you know, it's fine if people don't prep that way. I spend probably on average 4 hours per week planning my sessions and make like 5 to 6 pages of notes. Obviously, not everyone has this kind of time, and if they do, they might not want to spend it that way. But sometimes I feel like preparing heavily is almost seen as a bad thing, and it's really not, as long as it works for you, like it works for me. People might be concerned about their improvisational skills not expanding, but your players will choose something you don't prepare inevitably at some point. So your improv skills won't even be stunted because you'll still have to do it all the time. Also, this might be a huge D&D myth-busting moment. And again, this might just be true for me, but hang in here, hear me out. Sometimes players do exactly what you think they're gonna do. And then I get to use majority of my notes. When my players completely skip an area that I prepared, I'll either find some way to send them back there one day, or I'll just reuse it into something else. The amount of stuff that I prepare that I really, truly never use is incredibly minimal, and I prepare a lot. Some people are able to make amazing sessions with nothing but like a piece of scrap paper that has 8 bullet points on it, but for me, that's not me, and it works out just fine. Ginny D has an awesome video about this that I'm going to link, kind of about why don't over prepare just in and of itself isn't super great advice, so I'll link that because she'll explain it more than I can, and probably better too. My next point, I like having stuff. You don't need money items to run D&D, or even technically any besides the character sheet, because you can even roll dice online. I find that having stuff improves my DMing experience. For me, I have a bunch of minis, like I have a bunch of dice, and it delights me to no end when I have a monster and I have a mini that looks like them. My friends gifted me like AoE items. I feel like they may have just gotten them on Amazon or somewhere, I'm not quite sure, but they're in here. And like this is Fireball, and you can place this on a map and it says like the ring around, like what the radius is and some spells that have this. And placing this on the map just makes it so much easier than like counting squares and doing math and stuff. It's got Cone of Cold, it's got big lines. I haven't even used all of them. Some of them are still on here. They're things that like come up a little more frequently. Like you can put this on someone if you don't have condition rings. It's a hold person thing. I don't know what to call this. Armor of Agathis, Flaming Sphere, like longer ones that will affect things round after round. Also, some condition rings don't have specific spells on them, so that's useful. It even came with some animal tokens, which I think is for druids. Like these might be more common ones to turn into, like a giant ape. Oh, a little familiar. So if your familiar's on the battlefield, I'll try and find this and link it below, because I find that this makes things a lot easier. If you don't want to buy this, although I like the colors and it comes with extra things, you can also probably print out like templates like this online and cut them out if you don't want to spend any money. I was also given these condition rings, which I opened it and thought these were a bunch of macaroons at first. But they're not. They have like general ones like physical effect or magical effect for when there's not a specific ring for them. But what do we have here? Oh, we have hexed. We have stunned. And let's do this one. We have exhausted. And what's nice about these rings is they fit around most minis. You can try and put them over them and they'll hang off them, or you can put this down and put the mini over it and it'll like sit in the circle. Obviously it doesn't work as great for bigger ones, but you can usually hang these off of them. And just visually, it's nice as a reminder, and you can even stack some of them if they have multiple conditions going on. And I find, like, no, they're not necessary, and neither are the AoE things, but I find my DMing experience has improved drastically since I've gotten them. And now if I'm ever like running a session and a battle comes up and I don't have them, I'm like, oh, I should have brought them. It just makes things so much easier. And this doesn't necessarily even always apply to things I buy. I'm the type of DM who likes physical letters to hand to their players. I make maps and I label them with important locations. Of course, stuff like this can sometimes box people's imaginations in because they might only think to go to the places that you have expressly labeled or things like that. So that can be an issue for some people. Also, for some people, even if you describe a town, it's difficult for them to really picture it. So having a visual, even if it's not labeled, just of kind of the vibe of your town, I find can be helpful. And honestly, it's kind of nice labeling maps because then I can label places with an interesting name, and sometimes that will prompt them to go to it, versus if they went in the town and I just described what the town looked like. If they didn't ask if that specific type of store was around, you know, they probably wouldn't even go to it. So I find that's another tool. And also I like physical puzzles and physical props and things like that. I just like having stuff as a DM, and I don't think that's a bad thing. If you're like that too, obviously make sure to spend within reason, but if this is your hobby and you think it'll make your life better and you enjoy it, no shame in your game. Go get that stuff to make your sessions better. Also, I got a huge boat for ship sessions. It's great. Big boat. Like, big boat. It's big. Next is, it's okay for battles to take a while. I also see pressure online, maybe this is just me, for battles to like have to speed up. Like, I've watched lots of videos to improve battles because they're a point of weakness for me, and a lot of them talk about speeding it up, like making sure players really know their spells and timing turns, lumping lots of monsters together. And I think some of these tips can be helpful. All of them can be helpful depending on the table, and definitely making sure the person who's going next knows that they're going next. That's very helpful. But me personally, I've come to realize that battles can be long, and that's fine. I don't think it's necessarily an issue that they're long. You know, it's hard to read spells when you have a lot of spells, especially when you have an idea for what you're gonna do and then a party member does something and the battlefield changes drastically and now you gotta come up with something new. Maybe you forgot about an ability or you're just an indecisive person. Honestly, the thought of being timed on my turn would stress me out so badly. Plus, on top of that, if your character is like dying or something and then having to make a fast choice, oh my gosh. Like, I know maybe that's part of it, you know, get you in the thrill of the battle, but I think that would just get me too much stress for a game I'm supposed to enjoy and do for fun. I let everyone take their time finding what spell they want to use. I'll help them iron out rules, as long as it doesn't take forever, but you know, I'll look up a rule in battle that might help prevent me from making a mistake. Obviously, I use my judgment on this, but I really don't rush anyone. Our battles are long. That's fine. I still enjoy them. I think my party still enjoys them. So I don't think it has to be a bad thing. The next point is to follow your heart and not the plan. I think this is something a lot of DMs like intrinsically know. Yeah, of course, player agency, great. Letting them shape the plot, great. But I want to share some times that I was really thrown for a loop. Just kind of trusting the process and throwing out my plans really helped. So originally my campaign was actually only going to have one arc. But by the time we're halfway through that, I had ideas for more arcs, so I kind of extended the story, and all my players were cool with it. Actually, they were surprised when they found out I only had one arc, because they're like, I thought this was going to be longer. Obviously, if it's going to add significant chunks of time, you should talk to your players, but if this is like a long-term campaign where you all are just down to see it through to its end, following your heart and making the story go where it feels natural and feels right, without trying to force it shorter or force it longer, I think will really improve the quality of the campaign. Arc 2, I wanted the villain to be someone they met at the beginning of the second arc, and they actually had a rough first interaction, and I wanted them to know them so they could kind of see how they got more radical and started causing more problems and eventually have to fight them. Like, you could see how just right before he started going down the bad path. But what's interesting is that even though they had a rough first encounter, they actually managed to work things out and became allies. And so I was like, you know what? I don't see this person going down a villainous path anymore. So then they just became friends. And even though that changed my plans, for sure, they seem to like it better. And I think I do too, in retrospect. I feel like I was almost trying to force them to be a villain, whereas when I actually played them, they didn't feel like one. And my overall, not just arc BBG, but my overall BBG, I changed. He was a demigod emperor, and a lot of the party was skeptical on how they could realistically fight him because he has armies and he has the powers of a demigod, so he's really, really strong. And one of the players was interested on sort of hearing him out and reforming him because, of course, he has a bit of a tragic backstory. No matter the reason, I noticed that no one seemed stoked about fighting him, even though me personally, I wanted them to fight him so badly. The fight in my head was so cool, but I was like, you know, no one really seems to want this but me. So I was like, she's trying to reform him. Let's lean into that. I'm not just going to automatically do whatever they want, right? Because I don't want the story to feel disingenuous or like it always folds out the way that they want or like the world isn't its own. The world is going to operate the way it operates, with or without their involvement. But for some things, I really do want to take their lead on. And if they show me a path I didn't previously think of and it seemed like something that could happen within the context of my world, I want to give them the chance to do that. After some good rolls and some talks with that player, he was able to be reformed and sent on a better path instead of becoming the villain. And then I came up with a new one. Another one was killing an enemy I had called the Marauder, who was supposed to be this extremely strong, deadly monster that was in these woods they were going in, and they weren't actually supposed to fight it yet, but it was just something they could encounter if they rolled like a natural 1 on a random encounter roll, and the intent was for them to run away, and I'd even put an NPC in there to help them run away, and they purposely sought out this monster and set traps, and by the time it came, it was a big party too, and it was just one monster, so they were hitting it, and it got one turn, well, I thought it would have more. It spent it to summon minions, obviously to help the action economy a little bit. The minions got hypnotic patterned, and before it got to its turn again, it was killed. And honestly, I was kind of disappointed. And yeah, I could have given it more HP. They didn't know it's HP. I could have given it more resistances. I could have given it legendary actions, but I wasn't planning on them fighting it then, and then just changing it after the fact because they were clever about it and succeeded didn't quite feel right for that moment. And they were so happy they pulled it off. I just gave it to them, and they still talk about it whenever they face other challenges. They're like, yeah, we can totally do this, guys. We got this. We totally owned that other guy. And it makes me happy to see them so excited and proud of themselves. Even though I was supposed to use them later to be like a recurring enemy, it's dead now, and that's fine. They killed it, so let's move on. It's okay to let go of some of your plans, even if they're awesome, because that final fight was going to be really awesome. In my head, the one with the demigod. But like, players' plans are even more awesome. I think even though the final battle, I think it'll still be really cool. Maybe it won't be as cool as that battle, but I think the overall story is going to be a lot more improved, and I think it's a lot more touching the way that it went down. So I'm happy to follow my players where they want to lead the story, because they honestly lead it to a lot more beautiful places than I would have led it to. My next point. You can be on the party side and still be upset when your enemies die. One of my biggest guilts as a DM is occasionally getting upset when my enemies suck. Obviously, I don't take it to the point of yelling at anyone or blaming my players or huffing and puffing all session, but in the moment when I'm really hyped about a cool enemy and they keep missing, or players keep critting, or the sentinel feat stops me from moving once again, I can feel frustrated. It's not like I want my players to lose, but there's a certain amount of danger I want to present, or I want my enemy to demonstrate their strength for a cool moment, and I feel like a bit of a loser when they get pummeled. There's a thing called bleed that happens in acting, and in this case in role-playing games, where your character's mindset and emotion can kind of cross with yours, and vice versa. Honestly, this concept, I think, can be slightly inevitable, and it doesn't really have to be a problem as long as you know how to manage it, but I think that can be part of the reason that this happens. And it's okay to grow fond of villains. Like, your players spend a lot of time creating and playing their characters. You might have spent a lot of time preparing this villain. It's natural, and sometimes them getting creamed can actually throw off the plot, and then you gotta choose if you're gonna roll with it or not. But it's okay to be upset when you have a cool battle in mind and they outsmart you and or you roll like garbage, because no one likes to roll like garbage. Doesn't mean you hate your players or you're a bad DM. It just means you're a bit frustrated that things aren't working out the way you thought, and that's normal. Normally, I find that this feeling passes quickly, and it's basically over once the battle is over. But if you find you're struggling with it, I recommend thinking about how your enemy's sucking makes the players even more awesome. When I feel frustrated, I find I go into more detail about the party absolutely wrecking them, because that reminds me that this is about them being cool, and I get to see their delighted faces. That makes me feel better and helps dissuade me from they're winning so I'm losing mindset, which I know a lot of DMs, myself included, are like, that is not how I want to be. It's not me versus them. That's not how I DM. But that mindset can trickle in there inevitably on occasion, because you are playing their enemies sometimes. And so if you're thinking from their perspective, you can kind of get a bit of that frustration. And, you know, if you think you're going to present a cool battle for your players, you might feel like you failed or disappointed them when it doesn't turn out cool. It's okay, it happens. But I will say, when I'm a player, I love smoking monsters. I love absolutely destroying them, so I know my players are having a good time, so I try to remember that when I feel like I'm sucking. And then the last bit, which I have a lot of notes here, and then this last bit is just a couple bolded points here. I put, falling in love with your party makes life so joyous. And then I said, enough said. I like leaning into them being recognized and awesome. I think it makes them feel cool, personally, because they are cool. That kind of sums it up, really. My players have met multiple gods in the campaign, and they've spoken to basically all the royals in the world at this point. Not quite all of them, but majority of them. At least someone in the royal family. And they're level 16, which is quite high level, but they were doing this, you know, a couple levels ago too, even. And I think for some people, you know, that's a bit much. And that's fine if that's your table, but I find really leaning into my party being awesome and having NPCs respect them, really leaning into how cool they are. It just makes me proud of them, and just, you know, giving them their flowers when they deserve it. It makes me really happy. I guess that's not much of a tip. You know, I hope that you actually like your party. Of course, you probably like the people that you're playing with, but I hope that you can fall in love with their characters too, because DMing for a party that you really enjoy, just, there's nothing that compares. So that brings me to the end. Thank you for watching. I know I was kind of saying everything and nothing at the same time, but I hope it cheered you up or helped you learn something new or felt relatable in some way. So I appreciate you watching and making it this far. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye. Maybe I'll update it when I hit my 200 sessions. Bye bye.